back, everybody. This is the Navajo Nation Bar Association Traditional Teachings course, and this is the finale. We are conducting afternoon courses for Navajo Nation Bar Association members, but for this last portion, it's an important topic. It's an important issue, and we would like to expose the issues to the Navajo public, and therefore we made it public. So it's going to be from 2:45 to 4:45, and the name of the panel is Navajo Leadership and Fundamental Law Panel. And on there we have Shawna, Council Delegate, Robert Yazzie, Emeritus Chief Justice, and myself, Shawn Attakai, as the Judicial Staff Attorney, and we have Lisa Stevens as the moderator. So Lisa.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, Lisa Stevens, Yunushiat, Tibet Chilin, and Sakadi Bashishi, and Ligashi Che, and others, Ligashi Nella. We welcome you to our afternoon panel discussion on Navajo leadership and fundamental laws within that. Just a little bit about me. I grew up on the reservation. I'm here from Window Rock, and I lived in Houston, Texas for the last 30 years and moved back here.
Your audio is distorted, Jeanette.
It's distorted.
Yeah.
Is my audio okay now? Okay. So I lived in Houston, Texas for the last 30 years and moved back a couple of years ago. And I know what the challenges are that our Navajo Nation faces. So I wanted to become a helping agent here on the nation. So currently I'm a law student with Navajo Technical University, and we'll be graduating next week with a degree in law advocacy. And while studying at Navajo Tech, learning about the Navajo has honored the TESLA for direction and fundamental law and its application to our people and the issues that we face here in the nation. So first, I would like to thank.
It says it's still very hard to hear.
Now is it? Okay. Okay. So first, I would like to thank the Navajo Nation Bar Association for allowing us to make this panel discussion public to our community, and also special thanks to Navajo Technical University Radio and Online Radio, who is broadcasting this. Also to Honorable Council Delegate Shawna for allowing to have this on her social media platform, as well as Lynn Bitsui, who will also be streaming this on her social media platform as well. It's a very, very important topic that we are discussing, and to get the message and information out to our community and to our people, normally this panel discussion is paid for, but because we wanted to get it out to everybody, we are asking for those of you to support us by contributing your donation to the Navajo Nation Bar Association, which is a nonprofit organization. So if you're wanting to contribute your donation, please go to the Navajo Nation Bar Association website. There is a PO box there that you can send your check or money order to, and we would greatly appreciate that. So without further ado, I would like for each of our panel presenters to introduce themselves. You did meet them earlier. We have our Honorable Council Delegate Shawna, we have Staff Attorney Shawn Attakai, and we also have Honorable Chief Justice Emeritus Robert Yazzie. So with that, if you all could go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I hope I'm speaking loud enough, but yeah, I'm saying on Dr. Ada on the end fine. Aralarında şimdi yapmakları geçmiyor. Orası başçıyım, kaçıydı şeyler falan dışında. Hep anlatırsan işte arası manışını ki ya beş basanı ekmek eşit manışları Lectionly de adeni taşak açılmanız bu. Okey.
Yat Hastings go Shikedo Shidene she ya Shawn Attakai Dashinido bit Anin Slit Kapampas Chin Kinchini Dashichido Kia Ani Dashinale Ado in that my position is a staff attorney for the Crown Point Judicial District. I am married and do have children who are of the Tohetlini clan. So Yat
Ya şey ya التحليل الشماطي تو أشي الشجاع تو شيء تشجيع تو يعني تشجيع what are the nurse do such a report between أكو أنا أكو من الشيء عشان ده من الشيء مع الشيء يبدو Intanto una proiezione che ci sono Ado chiedere alle paure a sta. Ado non stato di agge shaho ado di cadi lo shido mi lasci non si sta. Quindi ci nas da kasna kat. Abtu nasci shi. Lo sai di da in the house the na so si da initiative Basins Banawish Avanashi Ado Nabalacha in the Naza the Sata should be yeah. Way Archer Adon there if Adon there we Hajilan's ego equal myself the Chief Justice back then and Associate Justice the late home of Blue House and then Associate Justice Raymond D. Osses who is now retired. But also on the Shishla, he I don't know, and quiet, one that the sharing. So she done it, that lashes powers and to know, see it. Aha, seems so good, the or big one, need or so at least time which is like the age bed. It's a good case that she but never bad honestly over it.
Thank you. I would also like to thank everybody that's joining us in via Zoom. I see that we have quite a few attendees, so thank you very, very much for that. We are all and should be very concerned about our Navajo leadership and the application of fundamental law of the Diné to our everyday work life and, in the work that we do to serve our people. So we feel that this session here would help us achieve clarity on what is known versus what is speculation. As this is an important issue affecting our nation's government and people, we are honored to have this panel discussion to share what we know as leaders ourselves. Also to answer any questions that you may have on the topic. And then also, more importantly, to encourage our Diné professionals to return to the reservation and help us in our nation's government. Help us to serve our people. We need more judges. We need more students to become interested in the field of law, to become tribal court advocates. We need more attorneys to be able to serve our people. So that's why we feel like this presentation here today is so important and why we are live streaming it on social media. So as the moderator, I will be guiding us through the panel discussion process. We have a very short time period here. We have 2 hours and we have 3 great panel presenters with a lot of information, a lot of knowledge to share. So with that, We're gonna start with some specific questions that each of our panel presenters will address and answer. So with that, let's just get right into it and start with our first question. And we'll start with, I guess whoever wants to go first, and ladies first, we'll start with Council Delegate Claw. Our first question is, there are many issues facing the Navajo Nation and our people. What are some of the problems and what should be our approach as leaders, as Natanis, to problem solve?
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that and congratulations on getting your degree.
Thank you.
That is the first step. Some of the issues that I see, educated individuals that are obtaining their masters, their doctoral, their associate's degrees, or either certificates. And when they return here, they're looking for a place where they can remain close to their home. And when we talk about fundamental law, the first thing is, states, where's your indulgence? And I think for us, those values still hold true to our young. They want to come home, they want to be near grandma and grandpa. And so some of the issues that I face as a legislator is, how do we create opportunities for people to come home? We have a lot of issues such as housing shortages, and then also places where they need to work, where they need to reside. So as a Navajo Nation leader, as a mom, those are some of the things that I look for.
Ado hate ku amma a jopa salahigi jono ku ala fa abanan shito listo fa abahoan has anto fa abata aketa hanodo atode. So you're laying the foundation. And so that's one thing I appreciate as a woman leader is that I have colleagues on the 25th Navajo Nation Council who share those same fundamental values. And you have to learn how to weave and incorporate that to really provide some of that healing. A lot of our nation is dealing with different traumas. We're coming out of a pandemic. And so some of our laws had to change, like burial regulations. These were things that our people didn't think of. So with this pandemic, we're kind of dealing with changes that need to happen, home sites. So with COVID, we got a lot of money for ARPA. And now we're trying to infuse that money to try to do economic development. We're trying to give homes to people. So there's so many things, but thank you for allowing me to express that as the first panelist. Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. On the screen is a PowerPoint graph. And the number one issue, I believe, is the loss of the language. There's a study from the Rock Point Community School that was published in the Navajo Times. And it shows that back in 1980, of the preschoolers, there were 93% spoke Navajo. 1990, 84%, and 2000, 76%. And 2010 was 51%. I used to be a former engineering major, so I kind of know how to deal with numbers. And we put it into a graph and forecast it out into the future. So it's a declining number with a negative slope, and it reaches 0 at 2050. So one of my main intent for this panel is to raise the alarm to the Navajo people that we are headed off a cliff because our language is who we are. It's our identity. And if we lose our language, then there's no more Navajo. The language encompasses the culture, It defines who we us. It makes us distinct, which is a term of art that they use in federal Indian law. And what do you think is going to happen if there's no more Navajos that speak Navajo? What's going to happen is it's going to go to the Treaty of 1868. The purpose of the treaty was for Native American Navajos. And if there's no more Navajos, then there's no reason to have a treaty. And right now, we know very well that there's a lot of outside interest for the natural resources. America, the United States, was discovered because of the resources. And that has, if as a lawyer, one of the things that we study is federal Indian law. And in federal Indian law, any lawyer knows it's a sad story. And I used to be in the military, Marine Corps infantry. And there, we know that the officers that go to officer candidate school, they study warfare. And guess what's there? The federal Indian policy. All those policies, they're like in order. And the main goal of federal Indian policy is to destroy Native American tribes. And we've seen that the North American continent used to be 100% Native American. Now as far as the Native Americans, we comprise roughly about 3% of the United States population. And of that, we Navajos, we're only almost 500,000. So our population is very low. And the last bit of the federal Indian policy is assimilation. There's a lot of assimilation policies, such as starting out with the Treaty of 1868. It takes away the land. Thereafter, there was like boarding school. And then there's just a bunch of them. One of the bigger ones was in the 1930s, and that's the sheep reduction. The sheep reduction had a big impact on us in terms of our economy. Prior to the sheep reduction, we used to be independent. We could rely on our cornfields and our sheep. And after that, after the sheep reduction, there was no more sheep. So a lot of the men, they had to leave the reservation and go into the railroads. My own grandpa, that's what I've heard that he did. He used to have a and they fish or the train. I guess he had like a lot of tar on his hand, and so we have stories like that. And today we are invested in the wage economy of the United States, and as such, all of our money goes towards taxes. So but in the process, the assimilation, I guess we're just going down. This graph here shows that by 2050, we're going to be lost. So if our leadership, and then that's the burden shouldn't just be put on the leadership, but on ourselves as the people. If we don't address that problem, then we're going to be like I say, we're going to be like if you go to the East Coast, a lot of the tribes there, they no longer speak their tribal languages. If you see them, they'll say like, "Oh, here's a little bundle that we used to have. We don't know what it's for." And so that's, I guess, my concern. I'm a practitioner, a traditional practitioner. And one of the things that I know is when we make those bundles, there's two elements that are very important. And one of them is bi. So our deer ceremonies are disappearing. There's probably only like one or two practitioners left that have that there's probably one practitioner. There might be a few. None of the other one is it's going. And are Eagle Way practitioners. They're elders, and there's probably one or two left. So if we don't deal with that as a nation, there's gonna be no more ability to practice that culture. So there's a lot to say, but assimilation is doing a number on us. And if we don't raise the alarm right now, I think that it's important that we're like at crisis levels. And niki nahat then ki ashon the kwage ban khapa ba yata don khapan sita kiston kha kwage yat ekon hich yada ki eight aben hich khas zito le.
Here to give the presentation on Never as on. So I feel honored sitting with the council delegate, Joseph Pilla. I was, like I said earlier, I was a judge for some years, and I did some representation of clients into courts. And so now today I teach at the Navajo University. So I give a lot of time to young people. And we have a new course that's called the Fundamental Law of the Net 1, the Fundamental Law of the Net 2. There's some really, interested students, young minds who are really interested. And so I have this, responsibility. What can I teach, what can I teach to the young ones here? What can they remember? What kind of tools shall I give them? And then also to have them learn to use the tools at hand. So there's some things we talk about in our language every day. And the stuff that we talk about is not written. When I first taught, law to the Navajo students, they always say, we don't have law because everything has to be written. And then I say, well, just listen to what your aunt might have said, your grandmother. Shito ish kata, ne? Meaning, I never went to formal school. Akunde, shito ish kata ninike e ado leb thousand. By yet they teach with thousand. So as a judge, I just think about myself, my role as a judge, my role as a practitioner, and I love to teach, And so always very conscientious about what I teach. I just don't want to teach, just for the sake of it. So when the question about, what are some of the problems? And what would be the approach, So you and I, we look around, there's problems everywhere. You could say, to some of us, certain problems are major. So sometimes when I was a judge and even talk with people who are serving as government officials, and people talk about problems, one thing that we really, really love to do is just talk about problems, And guess what? Go to, off reservation university, law school, whatever. People talk about problems. People earn their credential talking about problems. And then when it comes to, what are the steps? What are the approach to address the problem? So I think this is still, there's a lot of discussion. So when I look at, the law and, the world that we live in, mostly influenced by, the outside Anglo world. So when I look at, us as people, right? When people keep talking Navajo, when you listen to them, you can listen to them, They can be saying key words that we can use as an approach to solving problems. Like for example, this is what I understand. So what I'm saying here is this, having experience with law, the European way, having experience with law the Daniel way. And I see, that once upon a time I was a judge. And that's all I did, apply law to facts, law to facts. But then there came a time, what is a Navajo version of custom law? What's the Navajo version of traditional law? So when I was a judge, when the issue comes before me, and I said, yes, your response is good as a matter of state law, federal law. But what is it? What about Navajo law? You are a practitioner in this jurisdiction where the Navajo has honors of preference. We're not a state court, we're not a federal court. We just follow the procedures. But what is it? What's the approach? So later on, I found out that Title I was passed, and Chris Benali was talking about it, read it in Navajo. I said, that's the one that really, gave me some light. Then Nahastado Yadishkish, it's on that Nahastado Yadishkish, Ntsahakis Yishkate Dilda, the holy people. He the sin, he to the zempe. So in English, the word that said the holy people, by way of their prayers and songs, were able to put the universe and the earth together to make thinking. And still, you have to think more to know what it means. So right now, what we have here is we talk about our understanding. And when it comes to problem solving, we say, so some of the lawyers, they don't want to deal with this. And some do. And those who do well with it. And so I commend them, to try to figure out how the Navajo law works. So when the approach comes, I say now that it is our job as Navajo people, as relatives, knowing something about Behazani. When you go to law school, you do give a lot of time trying to work out an interpretation. And I see that the same thing to be done here as a student of the fundamental law. We're not going to know everything. We're not going to understand anything. You're going to know very little. So I always say when that question comes, what is the approach to, what do you understand? What's the approach? I say fundamental law. What does that mean? We can't even define fundamental law in English, but that's okay. We can make do of it. But what's important is the application of it. Where does it come from? We have Navajos in here. You all have hold a piece of the puzzle. So the question, what is the approach? So my take is this. Going to law school, practicing law the Anglo way, I learn about issue, I learn about rules of law, I learn about analysis, I learn about the conclusion. So there's no way you can use that to understand the fundamental laws of the man. So what I know now is that there is thinking, there is planning, there is enough life, there is the end results of regaining Hojan. So all of these, you look at that and say, the approach should be understand the problem. Don't just talk about the problem. You know, if we put our heads together and say, what is in Taha case? How is that an important element in terms of, you know, analyzing the problem? Identify the problem. Everybody in the discussion should know the different sides to a problem. Tom Sowell used to say to me, when you see a problem, you see two things, opposites. So sometimes says, what does that mean? Maybe it means position, maybe it means Portugal. Being face to face to say that there is a problem here if we have these two facing each other, the law and the problem. So something that you have to think about for a while. So what I'm saying here, I mean, we're not going to learn everything there is to know today. But I'm trying, it's really difficult, you know, to understand, to talk about fundamental law to the net. Because Attakai says, you know, how much time do you have? So that's what we're doing, is trying to explain, trying to understand the fundamental law. Even if we have some notion of it, then the next step is to apply the law to the facts as an approach. What does enough portion say about the problem? How is enough and Tahakis related to each other for purposes of, you know, working out the approach to the problem? Nahata is the biggest, and we have examination, you know, we learn the steps. So what Chris Benali read this morning, the beginning, there is order to all thought. There's order to Nahata. There's order to Ina. There's order to Sahasan. So as we sit here, you know, no one here knows more than other people. I mean, when they say, somebody says, you're an expert. Well, it sounds good, but I'm not, you know. The more I learn, the more I need to know. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's what makes it so important, is because it's not like we're talking about something that you have to go somewhere and learn. It's getting back to the basics as Dene people and learning our history and learning our culture and where do we come from, and the laws, our fundamental law of the Dene. It's in us. It's in our DNA. We have it. We just have to reach down deep and pull that out. And how do we use that? How do we apply it in our everyday life, in our professional work, within our personal lives? So that's why we wanted to be able to share it with everybody, is how do we use our own laws as Dene people to help with, you know, addressing the problems, the, you know, identified Nahotin that we come up with. And as Chief Justice just said, rather than just talking about it, what are we going to do with it? How are we going to apply our fundamental law to it and come up with solutions? How are we going to come up with options? So in talking about fundamental law of the Dene, and we're learning our culture and our history, we know that there's K'eh. So, and K'eh is the responsibility that all of us have to one another, to be able to help one another regardless of what position that we hold. And as Dene, we have that duty and responsibility with each other to build each other up, figure out how we're going to address this problem. So as a law student at Navajo Tech University, our mission statement is the Dene philosophy of education. So we learn about Nitsa'a case, Nahata, Ina, and Sehasin. How do we as students apply that to our studies, to our personal life, to helping our fellow students? So I think being able to reach the young minds at that level is so important, and it's so critical, because we are the ones that are going to be coming up, this next generation that are going to be taking on our nation's government, our nation's problems, working with each other, with our colleagues, how are we going to do that? So I think if we're able to reach our students at that level and start having those conversations and training them to apply it, we are much better than we were than before than not talking about it, which is why we're having that discussion today. So thank you three for addressing that question. We'll move on to our next question. And it's, what are the best ways for leaders to support other leaders? Delegate Claw, you.
Sure. Well, I just want to say, like Shawna said, it is an honor to sit among all of you here today to hear all of your teachings, your experience. And I think that's one way to build up leaders, is that it's a sharing of the same minds and coming together at the table, setting aside your differences to work for the people. And so one of the things that I wanted to just share is that I agree with Shawna, Mr. Attakai here, that we are losing the language. And so for myself, being in this position, one of my goals was to incorporate language back into our communities and then also to our children. So I drafted my thoughts of what I wanted to do to preserve part of that. And one of them is, as a mother, as a grandmother, as a masane or another lady, you're there to teach your children. And so that's the main thing, is to continue education. And no matter how old you are, every day you learn something new. And so with that, there was a legislation. It was introduced into council. And that's the legislation that I wanted to share today. So as you know, through the coursework that all of you are taking here, we do have our 3-branch government. And so it begins with our legislative. And so when we incorporated this legislation, it went over to the executive branch. And then we had our President Nygren, who signed it, and it became a law. And then now it falls over to Shawna over here, and she enforces the law from the judicial branch. So with that, as you heard, we're talking about our role as people and how we dwell here on Himana Hassan, on Mother Earth, and what are some of our fundamental teachings. So with that, we did look at our codes, our Navajo Nation codes, and being in this room, it just brought back a few of my memories. I took the bar back in 2022, and Shawna, I think she went and we did ours virtual, but we got sworn in. And so, but when I was here, we had plexiglass, we had our masks, but one thing was true, we still greeted each other as even though behind the mask, you still have your clans. And we greeted one another in that way. We sat here, and one of the things that I really wanted to do was make a difference. And for 26 years, I taught students. I'm coming from the role of an educator. I started my journey when I was young, graduated from Delegate College. And so like learning through Delegate College, you learn about, the language, the culture, all of the teachings. And then when you get to add that to your tool belt, you wonder like, okay, how can I use this? How do we move this forward? And so that was my role as an educator. And for many years, I taught courses on our Navajo Nation government, on the Navajo Nation seal, the Navajo Nation flag, the 3-branch government. But one question that always came up from our students was, why do we not have a national anthem? Why do we not have an official language? And so it really did start with our young people, because they really observe, they're really observant, and they see all of the things that are missing or things that are important to them. And language ties into how we address one another. It also carries compassion from your heart. When you say, and even in peacemaking, you use that, you incorporate that. And so it takes away those barriers. And when you're in front of the judge and you greet each other in that way, establishing it breaks that barrier down. They're more open to seeing the opportunities of change, and they use that. So as we heard from Mr. Attakai here with his graph of how our language is declining, it does really take our leaders to put that back in there as a law, to also incorporate tribal sovereignty, because now with this new administration, we're seeing that our Navajo people are on the defense in not only our education, but also like everything that entails our treaty, our healthcare, education, even the economic part. So for us, language is also our protection. We use it in so our protection prayers, those are our protection. But with that, I have our legislation here, and it just states that this is CD-52-24. And in here, I'm just going to read a little bit from it, but it establishes the Navajo Nation as taking the Nebazad as our official language. And so this went before the Law and Order Committee, and then also Nabikiyasket and Navajo Nation Council. And in here, it comes from the findings, which are incorporated in Title I. And it states the Diné customary law declares and teaches that it is the right and freedom of the Diné that the sacred Diné language be taught and preserved, so that they may be provided a holistic education of values and principles underlying the purposes of living in balance with all creation, walking in beauty. Title I, Navajo Nation Code, subsection 204A and C. B, the Diné receive various spiritual healing and teaching through worship, song, and prayer, nahaga, which must be preserved, taught, maintained, and performed in their original forms. C, as Diné, we are the image of our ancestors, and we are created in connection with all creation. Upon our creation, we are identified by our Diné name, our clan, our language, our lifeway, our shadow, our footprints. Therefore, we are called the Holy Earth Surface People, the Yenohoka Diné. And then it says, since time immemorial, our people survive by maintaining our value system given by the holy people. The core of our value system is embedded in the language. Given these reasons, the Navajo Nation finds it in the best interests of the Navajo Nation and the Diné people to amend Title I of the Navajo Nation Code as set forth therein. The Navajo Nation hereby amends Title I of the Navajo Nation Code, which is to Chapter 4, Official Language of the Navajo Nation, and under subsection 401, Official Language of the Navajo Nation, the Nebazad is the official language of the Navajo Nation. Preserving and enhancing the role of the official language. The Navajo Nation government shall have an affirmative obligation to preserve, enhance the role of the Nebazad as the official language of the Navajo Nation. Such an obligation shall include encouraging greater opportunities for individuals to learn the Nebazad. And so with that, I think that's how we support one another. It starts from the legislation, moves on to executive. When this signing was complete, Dr. Nygren, he also executed an executive order, which was to promulgate the language. And so that also happened. And then with our courts, they already do peacemaking, they incorporate the language. But that's just one example of how leaders support one another. So thank you for that great question. Go ahead.
Shawn?
So the question is, what are the best ways for leaders to support other leaders? And the answer for me is to follow the principle of best interest of the people. And what that means is you really have to assess your own interests. What's your interests? Are you in there for yourself? Best interest of yourself? They don't say best interest of yourself. In the children's law, there's a concept called best interest of the child. That's the number one standard. And they say that concepts of leadership in Navajo, you don't strive to be a leader until you get gray white hairs. Jita ne te nek etchigo. To e yan le de khatsi ata se jina ad at khacho lgosta jita nila. That's the Navajo traditional teaching. And one of the prerequisites for leadership is to have parents or to be parents. And you're able to grasp it. And the reason why is because it's no longer food just for myself. That's self-interest. But it's more food for my child here, food for my spouse here. So that then it becomes the best interest of your child, the best interest of your family. In our songs, we have songs that go like that. They say stuff like that and so that, as far as I understand it, expands when you become your leader, the people, when they say we want you to be the leader, and if you agree, then you say that it's in the best interest of the people. And earlier I was having a discussion and I mentioned that I thought it's already there, it's already in our laws. We just need to look at it and use it. And fundamental law, title 1, section 203, right here, A, says, it is the right and freedom of the net to choose leaders of their choice. Leaders who will communicate with the people for guidance, leaders who will use their experience and wisdom to always act in the best interest of the people. So I thought, it's already there. It's just a matter of reading it and following it. And when all the leaders are of that same mind for the benefit of the people, then it's not fighting each other. So that's the best way for leaders to support other leaders. And in all these societies, Navajo society, Hopi society, the Balagana society, there's two sides, just like in our shoe games. There's the night people and the day people. There's like that. So even on the Balagana side, there's people on the dark side. Even on the Navajo side, there's people on the dark side. So nahat an liniki shi hat hatet and kita na ye nahat niniki to khuzon nahat. And just like parents, amado ajen lingo hu hat ba chin ya akal yago je shi kita shi hat tan ke principles and that those were our fundamental law principles. And echo khuzon nahat ado na ye nahat. Today we're pretty much following the Balagana structure, which is a 3-branch structure. And I always say the 3-branch structure, they believe in triumphs, the 3 gods, just like in Christianity, the Father, the Spirit, and the Holy Ghost. And we need to make that into the net again. The net and the male leadership, that's about fighting. That's about warfare. So part of warfare and fighting is deception. You're out to outsmart your opponent using deception. That's what warfare is. So that's so that's where I think that I always say that we need to go back to our structure. I work for the judicial branch, and one of the things I say is, what's our role as the judicial branch? What's our role? Are we following the Balagana prescription of interpreting laws? Legislature legislates or makes laws. Executive executes or carries out the laws. judicial adjudicates and interprets the laws. The HBK, and it's not working for us. It doesn't seem like it. And look around in our own nation, Dibash, that we're destined for failure in 20, 30 more years. So I think that that's going a little bit beyond the scope of the question, but it gives you an insight as far as what's the best way to support each other. It's best interest of the people.
Thank you, Shawn. Chief Justice.
When I served as a chief justice, the matter of leadership always, the principles always was in my mind. What is the best way to give leadership to the court system and then to the government? So the only thing that I heard, listen to people, is collegiality. Something that, resonates with our culture. Leaders working with leaders. And so the only way to, learn the principle of leadership is to be open. Let that be a challenge. If you don't make it, you don't make it, and you do it again. So when I think of collegiality, I think of examples. We talk about what's the best approach and how do we as leaders work together. And so we live in a real fast world. We learn how to be very individualistic. Some people I hear say, me, 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 me. I mean, that's their perception of leadership. But, when you talk to the people who are gone, people work together. They really emphasize, ever since they were small, they learn how to think. They learn how to, what you learn how to think as small as you are. I'm going to give it to you one time and you remember. You'll know what to do when you put yourself to test to say what results will you get. So when I think of leadership, there's one thing that, again, Chris Panelists earlier said, he talked about the Nebuchadnezzar has ani lay, what the holy people did before, and they established certain things so that's something that we could use in our practice today. So what I see that the each leader working together, they need the net not only go pan to the case but the net do pan how to ask do did enough because there is each or do but to set the things. So what it means is that when you're a leader, you look at the four directions. In the four directions, you think for the people. You plan for the people. Planning for the people meaning this is the way we're going to do it. And I used to hear some, leaders of yesterday say, "Eto all yeda." If I tell you something, this is my plan. But I need to listen to you. What is your preference? What is your plan? That's leadership. But only what would I say? I show the hey, it's a look where he did what that is, if I say to my little brother here, my sister over there, I have a thought, I have a plan. Can we help each other? This is what it is. So I think when you talk about support of each other as leaders, that we got to really be grounded in what we've learned while we were growing up. Because the minute you're born with all the elements of your thinking, your little planning ability. All those come in you. So what Chris Benali was talking about was, what's the origin of our Behazani that is important to the people? that the leaders have to, follow. And the leaders have to know that the source of power they have, the government, is the people. So if the people is something that's foremost in your mind, you know exactly what to do. So when it comes to problems, we need to talk more about it. We need to analyze it. We need to break it down. If we say lack of, sometimes we say, I was on Judicial Conduct Commission. We have lack of judges. And why is that? Because one of the laws says, that when you become an applicant, you have to know the language, culture. And if you don't, then you're out. This is what we're talking about. Learn about the Never Behaz An. What does that the Never Behaz An say about this particular issue? It's not easy. So this is why I say the Never Nsikhes had in the Never Nahata had in the Never not laid the net. What do the people think about when they talk about it? Enough as to this issue. They want a solution that will allow them to, live together. So I think when you have a problem, the more you know, the better. The more your constituents know. What shall we do? Sometimes you say they have the wisdom, they have the perspective, they have the experience. It's just amazing, how much people know in terms of principles. And that is something that's proven in peacemaking. They don't side up with each other. They cherish the behaz an. You will have in sure. So when we talk about support, I think it's a matter of you and I, we could pick an issue like language. There's always two sides to everything. Just because, what will be the final decision? What will be the agreement? Maybe we'll never come together, but at least we know each other's, perspective. We acknowledge each other's perspective, and we respect. You can see what solution we can come up with. Whatever solution we come up with, that not honest could be, one that says, this is the choice of the people, not my choice. This is the strongest law that you can ever come up with. Just some thoughts.
Thank you. And I think that's so important because when we talk about leaders and leadership, when you put in the middle and you have a discussion, it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree. And if you do so with respect, because your goal is to find a solution. How can we figure this out? How can we make this work? And as I heard the panelists talk about being an educator, a mom, a grandma, and teaching, and Shawn spoke about, it's the best interest of the child. And then Chief Justice talked about, having a purpose. And I think as leaders, if you understand and you're grounded in who you are and you know your purpose, and you work in the best interest of the people, because as leaders are where they are at because people have chosen them to be in those positions, to be role models, to carry out, what it is, their plans, their visions. And I think a lot of times leaders can lose that vision very easily and forget, who they represent and why. So I think That's a very, very important key, is to always remember who it is you're working for and representing, and those are the people, your constituents. I also, as the three of you all were talking, it made me think about all of us can be leaders in one, way or another, leaders in our family, leaders in our community. And I found myself speaking to 7th and 8th graders at Seotso Middle School about a month ago, working with Navajo Nation Police Department, and just sharing with them, where I came from, what I've done, what my visions are, how we as young people, learn to speak your language, be proud of being Navajo. And, we operate in two worlds. That's the reality of it. We've got Western world, and then we've got our Navajo Nation here. And so to be able to embrace that and learn how to speak Navajo, that's what our young people should be doing. And when I polled the classroom and I said, how many of you all speak Navajo? It was like less than 10. And that really was eye-opening, because other kids, they may speak Navajo, maybe they were just embarrassed to admit that they speak Navajo. So I think just being in a position to encourage the younger kids, learn to speak Navajo. Think about and care for your families, and take care of your, parents and your grandparents. And so that's something I've committed myself to doing in my community, is working with our elders and, my veterans, and also, learning to speak the Navajo language and starting from ground zero, and it takes time. So thank you three for speaking on what are the best ways leaders can support leaders. We'll move on to our next question, and it's, what are the most critical changes that we as leaders, as Natanis, that we must make to face the future effectively? What critical changes, do we need to make? What needs to happen?
That is a really good question, Lisa. One of the things that I think, it's a balance. And we've heard earlier that the traditional way of thinking, the traditional way of living. And then over here, you have your Western ideals. And we have to bring that together, fuse that together, because the way that some of us grew up, it was different. We had a whip, and so even that part, that's why we call our judicial branch Nantani. So they're the leaders and they implement the laws, they're the enforcers. And so, coming to think about that nowadays, when you're getting after like our children, there's a fine line between that and abuse. And so a lot of times, we hear from kids, I'm being abused, and it turns out that what they mean is like their parents are getting after them. And so, I think the definition of that has even changed. And so it is difficult, because that discipline part has changed significantly. And even when they come to the courts, if anyone comes to the courts, they're sometimes not used to some of the penalties that they have to face, because for so long, maybe the parenting styles have changed as well. And so for me, some of those issues are, going back and thinking about some of the trauma that our people have gone through. We've had boarding schools that have just completely told people, do not speak the language, do not do your traditional way of thinking. And, I'm speaking from experience, because my parents, they're both fluent speakers. And for a long time, they said, don't speak Navajo, learn the English language, go to school. They sent me to preparatory schools, and really encouraged me to go to college. And so it was relearning and reestablishing that through my grandparents. And so for me, those are some of the critical changes, is that what you mentioned, when kids are speaking in Dinebazad at school, there's a lot of bullying. People are making fun of them. You're a John, or you're this way. And then they have that embarrassment. But where we're at here is, that's the wonderful part of this course, is that we're trying to teach people to take pride in their self-identity, take pride in being Dene, just take up that language, even if you don't speak it right, even if you make mistakes, just keep continuing, because that really is powerful. I mean, we're one of the nations that have our own way of governance, and our language and our culture is infused in that. And so it's just wonderful. And that's what makes us different. The one thing I really like about our courts is that you can have a Western degree. You can be, a Juris Doctorate, and you can specialize in, I don't know, maybe politics, political science, Indian law, and then you can, be a regular sheep herder. You come here, you take the bar, you pass it, you can go head to head in a Navajo Nation courtroom. And, that sheep herder might have an upper advantage because of the language. If you can tie that into the value system of our people, you do a little research on some of the past laws, you incorporate that, then that's what our judges are looking for. And then maybe you're representing someone where, as an outsider, it's a little bit difficult for them to understand the dynamics of the reservation. But this advocate, the sheep herder, will know, oh yeah, I've been there. Like, I've been in your shoes. I know what you're going through. I know the hardships. So yes, let me advocate for you. Let me get some resources for you. And so those are some of the challenges. But how do we, educate people out there to say, you are good enough, you're good enough, come to us and we will help you. And I think that's one of the things why we brought this social platform here, is we have 400,000 enrolled members. A lot of them have really lost their trust in the government. They've really seen some of the chaos. And so for me, those are the critical changes, is let's not talk about it from outside, get involved, come to your chapter meetings, come to, see our Chief Justice here, get to talk with her. And there's a lot of experts. And so I just think that those are some of the changes we need to, is, step out of your comfort zone and get involved, immerse yourself. Even learning one word a day will just, create some kind of catalyst for change. And so if that one student starts talking, and we were at Pinyon High School, and that was the same response, we did a little survey. We were saying, how many of you know how to speak the Nebazad? And maybe just like one went like this. And I was like, no, in the morning you say, and they started giggling and laughing, but it just brought that joy. And I think those are some of the changes that we need to be doing, is going back to our fundamental values of just, making people feel comfortable, making them feel secure, making them feel proud of who they are. And so that's where I think those critical changes need to occur. But thank you.
The question is, what are the most critical changes that we as leaders must implement to face our future effectively? I think at the beginning of this presentation, I presented the graph saying that the 2050 is when the language pretty much reaches zero. I think that's the most critical issue. And one of the biggest ways I think that the one thing that we can do initially is to be aware of that. And I think it was back in like around 2005 or 2006. I was the staff attorney for the Kayenta Judicial District, and I had the opportunity to present in front of the Navajo Nation Council back then. And I told him back then, I said, and the federal government, federal Indian law with their policies of destruction. Be aware of it, sin. And and I think that we need to become aware of it. We need to wake up and ben hit onish, ben hit diljij, ben hit niga. So that's what's happening. And as I mentioned, din hizada nihi khaliyah. So based on that, I think that education and awareness is a big component of it. The next big thing I think is the public school. Within the United States, education, there's a mandate for public school. Everybody's required to attend public school. And and it takes control out of our own leadership, out of our own education, our own children. So we need to take control of our own education, of our own destiny. And that means our leadership, come on, advocate for us. Advocate to talk down this public school mandate. That's one example. Another thing I always say is, there's sisnachin, so depends. That's what we say. But in practice, in the treaty, we're only given a small portion of the Western Territory. There is all that area between Sisnachin, Tzotzil, and the Bensa. That area that's in the Pickeria Apache region. And I always say that, then Hikeya has to, that was Dal and so our leadership, we can advocate to get that land back. In law, one of the things that you understand is that laws are not fixed, they're fluid. So based on that, what ani belakana and that's their version. On hisha, what's our own thought? We need to think for our own selves, and that goes to that in saha case. On hitan si case, yel ti an hita yel ti ado kuja an hita hini na ado an hita si nit zin. That's what we need to do. So that's the other part, the land that's in that area. Some things that can happen are children immersions. Children create children immersion programs such as like middle school here, the Tsahotso middle school. That's another thing. I think it's a good thing. Revive endangered ceremony. I already spoke about that to some extent. Most of the practitioners today, they're either that's the main one. In order to be, it's kind of like going to college. In order for you to get a PhD, you have to go to undergraduate school, and there's basic prerequisites. The prerequisite in the ceremonial system is so that's what you learn first. Then you can get into these other areas. And at that advanced level, some of the endangered ceremonies. Another one is the the beadway. It's gone. The last ceremonial practitioner was from Tuba City. He passed away like around the 1990s. So another one that's going is it's not the same as a blessing way. It's a reptile way. And there's only very few ceremonial practitioners. So that's another area. I think that from the Navajo Medicine Men Association, the Nahatasi Association, they have these same concerns. And they're saying, where's our leadership at? We can advise our leadership regarding these fundamental laws, which are laws. And There's no connection there. So there needs to be connection among our leadership. So and I see quite good naspe hutatol so these are just some of these suggestions that I think that critical changes that must be implemented to survive into the future.
Question, the most critical changes that we as leaders, not only must make to face our future effectively. We always talk about for better or for worse. You all know what that means, right? For better or for worse. When you experience the worst, you say, on that. You know, sometimes we just, our mind is fixed on that. And so I think that for better or for worse in our life, with respect to anything, is that it was meant to be. What we see today is meant to be. So what is it, if we're facing something, you know, if we're facing the worst, we just look at each other sometimes. And at ihway ako iisip siya. Balik if this is meant to be for better or for worse. Then he would say, like she was saying, quarterback is already here. Sometimes, you know, as you grow older, you think about what will tomorrow bring. So when you lose sleep, then the best thing is you look at what's within. You know, the more meditation you do, the better. So what this says is that when we look at four directions, don't ignore it. Listen to each other. If somebody says something, check it out. And if we do, then the more that we can work with. We'll talk about the Neban Sikhis, the Neban Nahata. Enough is the hardest one. Very hard to define. But that's the most important basis for critical change. The critical change can make Sehassan be a desired Sehassan. It can be just the opposite. So this is something that we have to learn with each other as leaders, even as relatives. It's not always the leaders that have everything. If you just depend on the leader, then I said, poor leader, you know, got too much. But so when you think about what are the critical changes, if you recall, Masanda Anish Hashketa, he tried out on and then the shna, don't do that. It can't end that. When on Zabe in Nata, the other share away. That's the kind of, you know, thought piece. Leaders, we don't, not even as leaders, but all of us were in it. And so when I think of this, you know, I think of now. There's only you know, there's always a way. You know, there's always a way out. The impossible always becomes possible. That's the ability that you and I have. We're not going to be gone tomorrow morning. No, we never will be. So this is something that we can share, especially our young people, you know. They're going to be facing this in the future. You know, is the language going to be gone? Of course it's going to be gone. That's one way. Can we do something with it? Can we live with it? Can we make the best out of the, for better or for worse? It's not going to be a matter of bouillon every day. One council delegate says, you which I don't feel for joining. Then I said, bingo, that's good. If we stop seeing things on one side, the European way for that of in journey it's opa those in journey in between is where we are. We make a choice. So we look at the future with those two, opposites. We can look at stability. We can look at hope. We can look at reflection. We can look at improvement. We can say, we need to remember, that only when we're being taught something, listen to each other. East, south, west, north. What does that mean? And so if we're able to come in together, right? Come in together. Learn about what inna is, so that you can share, we can share that with one another. Learn what sihastan means.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. And I'm thinking now about how, as leaders, we get so caught up in the everyday fast pace, and it's easy to blame and point fingers and not take responsibility and, be accountable for issues that may come up. And I think what Council Delegate Claude just said, and I like that kind of motto, is going back to our fundamental values. That's where it's at. And it's learning about, what is that? What does that mean? Teaching our children, going into the schools and talking about it, and having these kids learn what that Title I is and how do they apply it? How can they use it? How does it work? And then what Shawn shared, education and awareness, really understanding and learning what the condition and status of our nation is, the decline. We have to recognize that. And once you recognize that, then you are able to stop and slow down and say, okay, this is our problem. This is our anahote. What are we going to do? How are we going to stop that decline? And that's where, in learning the 4 direction, we know how to sit down and with a group of people or with students and, practice and do Nitsa'a case. How do we think about it? What are we going to do? We want to be here for the next, 200, 300 years. So knowledge is power. Being able to educate ourselves regardless of what age we are, we can always learn something. And then also having that connection with one another, as we're leaders, practitioners, having that connection and just being each other's support is what there needs to be more of. So thank you all for sharing that. And as we get down to probably the last 20 minutes of our panel discussion, because we want to be able to leave the last 15 minutes for questions and answers. The next question is, in our nation's government, there's a deep decline in language, culture, custom, and tradition. So as leaders within our nation's government, how do we bring that back? How do we bring that back? Delegate Claw?
Oh, okay. She bansis case she sani ako she tiel halodo she catch di akaspi se is ako she latsen the halodo she yo that and the arts ako kaadet ehigishi etsa ikut jo asanjano di kinalda abi nantim sala abits ohota ako di kut hawana mazasa kwa nana nishalo get that no a benetchin. So I think for myself, you know, one big part of teaching for me was you are the role model. People look at you. They watch what you do, they watch what you say, even your children at home, how you speak to them, if you really assert discipline, but you give them the love and the caring. One thing that was told to me, and I represent Chinle, is that we have celebrated 100 years of Navajo Nation government. It took 100 years for a woman, Danette Asan, to take the place as a council delegate. So for me, you know, I took that role very seriously. And every time that I go into the council, in the official council session, one thing those grandmas told me is, anytime you go in there, you represent us. You don't wear pants in there. You don't wear your hair down. You wear your tiyas, you wear your jatos, you wear your, you know, your clothing as a Dene woman. And I have done that because I respect those matriarchs of my community. And so I think a big part of that is you have to walk the talk. And our culture is, there's several teaching about leadership. You know, one of them is Doniochita, you don't lie. You know, there's certain teachings that are given to you. And then they tell you like, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. And that's a big part of our teachings here within the bar is your ethics. That's the main thing, is that, you know, as we heard from Shawna, you're not thinking about yourself, but you're thinking of the larger picture of the whole. And for me, you know, as a government leader, I think that's one thing that is important. Another part for me is transparency. I go live at our chapter meetings, and it is very difficult to be in a leadership position, especially when you're trying to continue your culture, your teachings, the tradition, because it's far and few nowadays. And it's hard because as a woman, sometimes you do get disrespected, you know, and it's very sad to see that in your community, you will have men that come up to you. They say really harsh things, but as a woman, you know, you keep your composure. And that's just some of the teachings that we have, is that you do have to take that criticism. And that's one thing that's part of our culture. They always say that, you know, take it in, you know, breathe it in, but, you know, don't get mad about it. Just take it as a learning experience. And I think that's one part of our custom that we have. And as leaders, we have to showcase that. Another part is thinking about everyone. Just in case you think about your children, the elders, the veterans. And so, you know, sometimes it takes a compromise. And believe me, that's probably one of the biggest things that I face as a challenge as a leader, is that sometimes you have these different demographics of youth. You have the veterans, you have the elders, and then they all have issues that they want, but you don't want to put one above the other. And when you do, you know, you have to justify that. There are times when, you know, your traditional teachings come out. And like for myself, like I said, being the mother and always having prayer. And that's one thing I think that's innate with all of us, regardless if it's traditional, but just your spiritual being and how you're tied into your environment, the land, we're connected to everything, whether that be living or non-living. And so a big part of that is teaching that. And I try my best, even though I'm a government leader, I'm a legislator, I always make time for children, always make time for our elders. Before we got here, we stopped at the senior center Yate Amapehenihiki to all of those that are out there. Happy Mother's Day. That's, just a simple message like that going into a senior center. You should have seen those grandmas and the moms. They were so happy. And you don't think like just taking 10 minutes of your time just to go in there. And then I walked in and they were just like, whoa, because they don't see people with TS anymore. And they just, it uplifts them. And then sharing a story, they think about their mom, their grandma. And so everyone there is yearning for that. They're yearning to be loved. They're yearning to be secure. They're yearning to have a place in our society. And I think that's one thing that we're all doing here. And through this course, we're showcasing that. We're showing that our 3 branches of government have come together, and we are trying to preserve that. So I think we're doing a wonderful job, and I'm so honored to be here with all of you, Shawna and also Shawna as well. So thank you for that question.
Let me share a slide. So number F, section 202 of the fundamental law, section F, it says that the practice of the nebe b'nahat through the values and life way embodied in the nebe behezani provides the foundation of all laws proclaimed by the Navajo Nation government, and the faithful adherence to the nebe nahat will ensure the survival of the Navajo Nation. I think that's very critical right there. And the way I see it, there's 2 parts to that. One of them is that when you ask a normal Navajo, I think it was mentioned that there's no confidence in the government. And so when you ask them, describe the government then, why not? They say corruption is corrupt. I think that, like I said, from the outside, the policies were meant to destroy Native Americans. And one of the ways that they do that is to divide and conquer. So in that division, that's where there's a lot of infighting. And that's why I do not with the Zish that there is no unified single mind. So that's the first portion. You need to address that infighting. The second portion is that installing leaders that know both sides. It was mentioned that we live in 2 worlds. That's a fact, no matter what. And when you listen to a lot of those, both council proceedings, court cases, and so forth, we don't understand each other because somebody expresses their thoughts in Navajo. Those people that don't speak Navajo don't understand that, and vice versa. Some really good Navajo thinkers and speakers don't understand the English side. So within the Navajo traditional songs are the mountain songs. And one of the basic principles is Zichnant'ah, Zichnant'ah. And the way I interpret that to mean is, Junli, when you get on top of a mountain, you get way at the tip. And at the tip, that's where you can see on this side of the mountain, you can see on this side of the mountain. And I always think about it like, over here are the English speakers, the people that whose perspectives are in the English. They can't speak Navajo, they can't see this perspective. And then over here, you see the Navajos, they can't see over here. So we're divided. And with that, you need leadership installed that have both of those, that understand both of those. And based on that, I think I took my own course, my own life course, and that is get a law degree. In the Balagana world, the lawyers, they become the leaders. For example, a lot of the Congress people, a lot of the presidents, they're lawyers, like Barack Obama, Clinton, all those, they're lawyers. Congress people. On the Navajo side, in the early years, the Natanis were the medicine people. So that's the medicine way, and that's the most basic one. And both sides. be hochong ego hochbahos and obahojins and that's the way then you're fully informed. You can look at both sides and make those decisions based on that. But if you only know this Balagana side, you're not informed about the Navajo side. If you only know the Navajo side, you're not informed about the Balagana side. And that's where our leadership in Linigi, that's I think what our people should strive to install. And based on that, I guess, but right now, as it is, there's a lot of misunderstanding, miscommunication, and it's like a vehicle with the tires in different directions and can't move forward. So those are, I think, some ideas about that question.
The question in our Navajo Nation government, there is a deep decline in language, culture, custom, tradition as leaders. How do we bring it back? Maybe there's whatever way we understand this question, is what we should deal with in a way that, how do we survive as a group? We know the meaning of working together. And we know the meaning of making commitment. Commitment sometimes could mean a lip service. Nothing happening up ahead. A commitment with somebody who just, you'd be surprised, somebody's coming forth, no matter what. So I think what is, how do we bring it back? How do we bring what back? We can read it in a lot of ways. We have different ways of responding to the question. And sometimes, when we see each other, sometimes as Chief Justice, some council delegate wouldn't smile at me. And then, I would just go ahead and smile. And one person said, always say hello. Even this guy doesn't, you shake hand with him, So when I retired, I was sitting at the pharmacy. I wasn't smiling. And one of those council delegates came, won't you ever smile? So I think, I mean, there's a lot of way to respond to this question. I think sometimes it's a matter of attitude. Sometimes a matter of, feeling good, taking care of yourself, self-care. And a lot of things people would, when you talk to somebody, you need to talk to somebody. People would just say, accept the way things are. Don't fight it. Accept yourself the way you are and appreciate. Always remember, whatever you're going through will be there tomorrow and the next day. So you have a choice, So I think in that situation, we have a obligation, responsibility to our own relations, our children, teach them no matter what. Tell them like it is, but say, I'm with you. I'll have your back. Sometimes, things don't come right away. A family may be so distant from each other. Sometimes, when you try to, you don't feel like talking. You just sit there and, the night goes by. So something like that, how can we bring this back? All the things are going down. I think in the midst of all that, we can say, I'm gonna make my commitment to make things better for myself, for my relations, be positive and be aware that whatever I say negatively is not gonna make me happy. I mean, that Nagye is Nagye. Nagye wants to be Nagye and to take you along, all the way. But happiness is something that's hard work. Is hard work, discipline, hashke, So it's hard to live, those two, to those two scenario. And I think, if we were to, I think in the midst of that, if we, be mindful what I have to do for the day. I think that would probably bring something, a thought that, something's on the way. I mean, that's the some of the way to respond to the question. Thank you.
So the question is, how do we bring this back? And as these three amazing leaders have talked about for the last hour and a half, I think about having conversations just like this more often. Maybe with all of the council delegates, maybe with the executive branch, maybe with the judicial branch, maybe in our communities, our chapters, our schools, our universities, our bar association, and keeping those conversations going, I think is a starting point, we talk about. And, as Chief Justice mentioned, have sometimes you have to just sit in the middle of that and be able to acknowledge the good and the bad, the positive and negative, but not to be so quick to just run away and say, that's too hard, there's no solution, and giving up. Because then it takes commitment, it takes purpose, it takes being able to reach across the aisle and say, I may not like you, or I may not agree with what you think, but let's come together. What are we gonna do and figure it out? And I think the other thing is getting involved, all of us, getting involved in our own communities with our neighbors, our schools, or, chapter house meetings. I've been to several chapter house meetings and planning meetings, and they're very interesting. I'm trying to get involved with those to see what it is that I can do to help out. And then just acknowledging that this work is not easy. We have to be able to, like you said, we got to walk the talk. It takes one thing to say it. Can't give lip service. What are we going to say? And then what are we going to do? And then in doing that, how do we apply our 4 directions, our mitzvah case, and how do we implement and apply our fundamental law to our laws, to our decisions, to our, lawmaking and, our counterparts. So I think we had a really, really great discussion on Navajo leadership, fundamental law of the Diné. Really, really happy. I'm excited to be involved with this. I am a committee member with our 4 Direction Committee, and we meet every Tuesday and we talk about this. How do we move it forward? How do we get it out there? How do we bring back our Navajo tradition and our culture and, in our communities? How do we do that? Do we go out to the, chapter houses? Do we do videos? Do we go on social media? And here we are. So I think we had a very good discussion. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to join us. We look forward to future meetings and discussions, and always Shawn, taking the lead in our 4 Direction committees and your vision. Thank you for that. And then of course, Chief Justice, thank you for all of your knowledge. With so many years in our nation's government, and you share that with us, so definitely appreciate that. We've got about 15 minutes for any questions and answers from those who are here present in the room, and then those who are online. Does anybody have any questions about what we talked about?
I have something to add real quick, to kind of go towards what Shawn was saying about how it is very important to kind of see both perspectives, going to law school and getting that legal background, while also delving yourself into Navajo fundamental law, especially working within Navajo Nation. I'm non-Navajo, I'm an enrolled member of Citizen Potawatomi, but I have a lot of respect for the way Navajo Nation does things. And I really appreciate that I've gotten the experience thus far, and I'll be getting a lot more experience throughout the years in Navajo courts. But I would like to kind of put emphasis on, I do think it's very important to get that legal education to help support it. And kind of a plug here, if that is allowed. ASU is starting a program in 2026. It will be ABA accredited for an online part-time JD program. It is designed for those who are already working in career fields, but want to get that legal education. And I think especially with Navajo community members, that is an amazing opportunity. ASU has an agreement with Navajo Nation that provides scholarships for community members to attend ASU, and I'm pretty sure that would correspond with the online JD program that will be started up here. So that's a plug. If anyone is interested or know anyone that might be interested that they are working with who want to get a JD, and MLS is another good alternative, which ASU has good programs for that as well.
Every time it came up these plans or how we can go forward, then who try to go? No, ain't no, simple. The Title 26 came on. Then again, that was a government mandate. LGB. People never had to say it. It was imposed upon them and said, take care, leave it. These fees we're looking at Title 26. From there, decided, okay, let's look at the cuts of the Navajo Nation government project or the foundation. We're saying it's a chapter government. That AR related in the country. Let's start with that. So we're trying to go top down, let's look at the bottom. So we said, okay, these little chapters, 110 chapters across the Navajo Nation. That's a lot. A lot of little government structures. And they're right close to each other too. They don't work together. It's just like what the one question was, how do you work together? They don't work together. So we said, okay, let's go the regional tech government. Not into the people. We said, let's do that type of government, give it to the people, then let's, oh man, all the resistance that came about from the chapter government. They don't want that. Then again, we moved it through council. Council approved it, merely. Then went to president, that's when we gave days. So let's take it and reform measure. Let the people vote on their form of government for the very first time in history. Very first time in history. Let's let them vote on their form of government. They voted down. They don't, they want change, then give us the opportunity to have a 2-year window to put everything together. Happen. People who did not never vote. And that change is really, really hard, especially when it comes to government. And the second thing I want to bring out is sustainability. We need to have a Navajo Nation areas of government. That's alternate language that we talked about earlier. Area of good environment, area of science and so forth. AD behind that. That would, I think, the movement carry us into the next 100 years. Look at the Japanese. Every 4 years. Elections coming up in a year and a half again. They'll have no ideas coming in. There's no big roadmap. It's a lot that follow. Go every 4 years. Hey, what's up? Our funding came in, and everybody was all sick. We had all these plans, but all not happened. Administration changed. The ideas came in. I just said, no, they don't. They thought like that. We spend a lot of money. That's just what I want to bring up. Change.
thank you for sharing that. Could you please introduce yourself and then just briefly your past roles?
Jamie Hindu, I'm a prosecutor for the Navajo Nation. Station out in India. And then like I said earlier, I worked for Navajo Government Development as a policy analyst and executive director. Then after that, transitioned to government itself, sat on the group of council. So I was with them for years, pretty much. Very excited for you. That's when.
Thank you so much.
He's also the vice president of Bar Association.
Yes, thank you. Other questions or comments? You have anyone there?
I'll have a question. My name is Ditton, I'm a lawyer, about 2002. Chief Justice, I was surprised you didn't speak about 1989. I'd be curious to hear your reflections on where we are today, and if you would have predicted where we are today. You know, if you could remember, you see my question. You know, where we come from, and reflecting in this conversation about language, culture.
It's a long story.
Never
Never
talk
talk
about it. Somebody want to write a book about it, but I usually step away. And you know, when the verdict came back on the first case, you know, so I sat in my, you know, my chambers, you know, I literally shed tears. I said, how could this be? So before it started, I said, I hope the wind doesn't blow toward me, and it did. So then I said, well, I told myself, you want to be a judge? This is what it is, you know, take it on. So I just did. So I think a lot of things have happened. And so sometimes I look back and it was you know, there was a lot of many days for hearing. Lawyers fought each other all in the middle, you know. So at the end, first time I spoke with Peter McDonald, he was sitting in the cell. I wanted to know how he was doing. So, I mean, a lot of people want to see him convicted. And a lot of people want him to have a better outcome. So, then he said to me, I don't know what plan are you? شو بتأمنش له؟ Oh, شجعني ليلى. I mean, to this day, that's where it's at. You know, I always thought that, you know, core values is really a good medicine, you know. So from then on, we went to different places, spoke to the public, same time. I mean, I didn't ask for it, but he was there and I was there. His family was there. Some of the family were, you know, make connection with me. I think it was Hope. She was a council delegate. She really expressed her appreciation of my service when I was about to retire. But ever since then, I think McDonald, you know, he always, you know, greeted me with much courtesy. And so I thought, you know, after all that, you know, so it gave me time to think, you know, this is the kind of stuff that we're about as Navajo people, you know. You know, so one thing that makes you realize is that, you know, Navajo people are really stuck to the Hazani. They stand with it no matter what. Because other than that, people always say it when I travel different places, you know. Navajo courts is really at the, at the control of the council. It was never that way. So, so I think, really, we really, brought the court together. I mean, Tom Sowell was the chief justice, so we met all the time. All he said is that, you know what's going on. You know your position. Just stick to your job. Do your job and make the decision, listening to the law and to the facts, and you'll sleep well, That's all he said. He didn't say anything about anything else, just your role, And so we were very, we had to be, in terms of where we went, we have to really be mindful of our ethical duty of responsibility. And that, I think that's what I saw in the judges and the nomination council really came back together and made some changes. And I think what gave me the impression is that on the night that 2 people were killed, I guess they were gonna do a martial, what do you call martial law order, and the planes were ready to come down. It didn't happen. So it's just that the Navajo people decided to handle the situation. And I think that's what we're talking about here. We can do it. No matter what happens on the outside world, we are together with our relationship. What we talk about is real. The more we can have sessions like that, imagine what we can see, especially with our kids in the future. They'll say, my grandmother, my grandfather taught me this. That's what we want to hear, So this is a good session. Thank you for the question.
We have about 2 minutes, and I'd like to just finish up our panel discussion by just allowing each of our panel presenters to just give your lasting words of encouragement or support. We'd appreciate it. Council Delegate?
Yes, thank you. I want to thank all of you. You're here for a purpose. And Vita, thank you for that wonderful question. And I think that as Dene people, we have the power. It is an innate-ness. It falls within our duty. We think about future generations and this role that you have. You are, cutting the waters here, and you're creating that ripple effect. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for all the outstanding work you're doing. And then even to our viewers out there, I hope that you feel inspired by our leaders here today. I hope you feel compelled to be a part of your community, to make that change, even as we heard from my brother here, within yourself. Take that time to meditate and pray and think about what's important to you. And that's why we're here today. We're giving back some of our time to share what we have, our insights. And I just want to say, be well. I wish you all the best. And thank you for joining us today.
I just want to say thank you to everybody, especially the presenters. Ben Hikao Jeto Yegon Sagobe Ahotki Letza. And I just want to say that these are very valuable teachings that we've heard. And I hope that you learn it and cherish it and use it. And like we're saying that we're in a time of crisis. So the one thing that I want to say is, and like I used to be in the military, and sometimes like we'd be going up those big mountains, and I guess you're forced to do it. So I think that that's the type of mindset that is going to be required for us to survive. And the world right now is a changing place. It's a very changing place, and therefore we have to maintain who we are. We have to maintain our sense of stability and you yourself stick to these principles. And those are the fundamental laws that we're talking about. Who are you? Where are you going? So, good luck.
Mhm. I just wanna, it's good to see all of you. Some of you I have never met. And I've seen you and good to see you. Beta, yeah. So, I hope, we all learned something from this experience, you know. Just to encourage ourselves, we need to keep going with what we have, you know. So that we got a long ways to go and we can make it. We can still be together, you know, in a good way. With Jean's way on Soban, in this case. Thank you.
That wraps up our panel. Thank you all, for joining, and we look forward to our next meeting. Thank you.